The dog was not afraid to cross the bridge. He was afraid the man would bury the child beneath it. Mason Reed stopped at the edge of Cedar Run Bridge as Atlas pressed his shoulder hard against Mason's leg. Rain moved across the West Virginia Valley in gray sheets, darkening the boards, the steel rails, and the shoulders of Mason's charcoal field jacket. The river below had risen all afternoon, carrying branches, leaves, and brown foam past the stone support in the center. Atlas stood directly in front of him, paws planted on the wet concrete approach, body rigid, amber eyes fixed on the broken section ahead. "Easy," Mason said. The German shepherd did not move. Mason looked across the bridge. A portion of the deck had dropped several inches near the middle span, leaving a dark gap between two rows of boards. New blue paint covered the steel frame, but rust bled through beneath it in narrow red lines. A temporary barrier lay on its side near the trail, as though someone had dragged it away. Mason had come to inspect the restoration before the final handover. The report in his truck said the structure was nearly complete. No public access. No unresolved hazards. No reason for a trained K-9 to refuse the first step. Mason shifted his weight forward. Atlas blocked him again. Once, Mason tried to move around the dog. Atlas stepped sideways and pressed closer. Twice. On the third attempt, the shepherd caught the lower edge of Mason's coat gently between his teeth and pulled him backward. Mason stopped fighting the warning. Years in the United States Marine Corps had taught him that fear scattered attention. Training focused it. Atlas was not looking across the bridge. He was looking down. Mason lowered himself onto the dry edge of the concrete abutment and leaned toward the gap without placing weight on the damaged deck. At first he saw only rainwater, twisted shadow, and the river moving 12 feet below the support ledge. Then something yellow shifted beneath the bridge. A sleeve. Small. Human. Mason's breath tightened. "Hello," he called. The river swallowed the word. Atlas moved to the south side of the railing and stared beneath the middle span. Mason lay flat on the stable concrete, keeping his chest behind the joint where the bridge began, and angled his flashlight through the opening. The beam found a narrow inspection platform attached to the central support. A child sat against the wet steel, nearly 12 feet below the deck. Her yellow raincoat was streaked with dirt. One hand held a red whistle. The other gripped a metal brace above her shoulder. "Do not step on the bridge," she called. Her voice was thin beneath the water. "It moves when you do." Mason did not move. "My name is Mason. What is yours?" "Zuri Carter." "How old are you, Zuri?" 10. Atlas lowered his head over the edge and whined. Zuri looked up at him. "Atlas, stay." The dog froze at the command. Mason studied the platform. It was about 3 feet wide, bolted to the southern side of the support. The river remained roughly 6 feet below it, but the current was rising against the stone. A loose section of deck above Zuri shifted whenever the wind pushed through the span. "Are you hurt?" Mason asked. "My wrist hurts, but I can move my fingers." "Can you stand?" "Yes, but I am staying low." "Good. Keep doing that." Mason reached slowly for his telephone and called emergency services, giving the bridge name, county road, water conditions, and Zuri's position. The dispatcher confirmed a high-angle rescue team was responding. Mason ended the call and looked toward Atlas. A red scarf was tied around the dog's collar, soaked from the rain. Zuri had sent him for help. "They are coming," Mason said. A heavy branch struck the central support below. The bridge shuddered. Dust and rust fell through the gap. Atlas backed away without being told. Zuri pressed closer to the steel. Then her yellow sleeve disappeared behind the tilted deck. "Zuri," Mason called. No answer came. Only the river. Then 3 faint knocks sounded from beneath the bridge. 2 hours earlier, Mason Reed stood at the head of a conference table in Charleston, while rain traced silver lines down the windows behind him. On the screen across the room, Cedar Run Bridge appeared clean, freshly painted, and almost ready to reopen. The project report said the restoration was 98% complete. New decking, reinforced steel, repaired railings, improved drainage. Only the final handover remained. Mason was 47, a white American billionaire, the founder of Reed Civil Mobility, and a former gunnery sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. His foundation had funded most of the bridge restoration because Cedar Hollow needed more than a landmark. The crossing connected families to the elementary school, the library to the Riverside Trail, and the eastern side of town to the nearest medical clinic. During floods, it also served as an evacuation route. Mason had called the project a promise to the community. Now one missing detail made him reluctant to sign his name beneath it. He enlarged an inspection photograph on the screen. The image showed a newly installed support bolt beneath the center span. The metal looked clean. The blue paint was unbroken. But there was no date, no location marker, and no Cedar Run nameplate visible anywhere in the frame. Derek Cole, the site director, stood near the wall with a folder pressed against his chest. The inspection team uploaded the complete set yesterday, he said. That image came from the middle support. Mason looked at him. Then why is the identifying plate missing? Derek glanced toward the engineer seated along the table. The photographer probably used a tight angle. Where is the load test record? Scheduled for this afternoon. Mason turned another page. The barrier removal is listed as complete. We moved the temporary fencing to prepare for tomorrow's ceremony. Before the load test? Silence settled over the room. Outside, thunder moved across the Kanawha Valley. Mason remembered another maintenance report from years earlier, written during a marine training operation. A small warning had been marked non-critical. A deadline had been protected. A close friend had trusted the paperwork and nearly paid for it. Since then, Mason had repeated the same sentence in every safety meeting. Warnings did not become harmless because they delayed a schedule. Yet his own company rewarded teams for finishing early, staying under budget, and avoiding public setbacks. The bridge remains closed, Mason said. Derek shifted his weight. It is closed. Then the barrier should still be in place. Mason placed the unsigned handover agreement inside his field bag. I am going to Cedar Hollow. One executive looked toward the rain. The river advisory has already been issued. Then today is the right day to see what the bridge does under pressure. Mason left without security or an assistant. He drove north in an old dark green Ford pickup carrying a flashlight, reflective vest, first aid kit, compact binoculars, and basic site inspection tools. The city thinned into wooded hills. Rain filled roadside ditches and darkened the slopes. By the time he reached Cedar Hollow, the river had turned brown and fast beneath the trees. He passed the library, a small brick school, and a row of homes built above the flood line. At the trail entrance, a directional sign leaned sideways. The temporary bridge barrier lay several yards from where it should have been. A child's purple bicycle rested beside the fence. Its rear wheel was still turning slowly. Mason stopped the truck. On the wet trail ahead, a German shepherd stood alone with a red scarf tied around his collar. The dog looked at Mason, turned toward the bridge, and ran. Earlier that afternoon, 10-year-old Zuri Carter sat at a long wooden table inside the Cedar Hollow Public Library with a purple backpack at her feet and 3 old photographs spread beneath her hands. She was a Black American girl with warm brown skin, neat braids, and observant brown eyes that seemed to hold on to details other people passed without noticing. Atlas rested beside her chair, his sable coat brushed clean, his faded search and rescue collar lying against his neck. Outside, rain tapped softly against the library windows. Zuri's grandmother, Evelyn Carter, worked behind the front desk, sorting return books while the local weather radio warned that Cedar Run could rise several feet before evening. Zuri was finishing a history assignment about the bridge that connected the east side of town to the school, the clinic, and the Riverside Trail. One photograph showed the first wooden crossing. Another showed a flood from decades earlier. The third showed her great-grandfather, Isaiah Carter, standing beside a welding crew during the bridge's first major repair. He wore heavy gloves, a dark work shirt, and the serious expression of a man who believed anything worth building should be strong enough to carry people home. He helped repair the middle support, Evelyn said. That bridge mattered to him. Zuri traced the edge of the photograph. My teacher said we need one picture from today. From the trail entrance, Evelyn replied. Not from the bridge. It is still closed. I know. Evelyn looked toward the darkening sky. Take Atlas. Photograph the nameplate, then come straight back. Zuri packed her camera, notebook, red whistle, water bottle, and the old photograph. She put on her yellow raincoat, fastened her bicycle helmet, and clipped Atlas's leash to his collar. The trail began behind the library and followed the river for less than a mile. Rain darkened the pavement and made the leaves shine. Atlas trotted beside the bicycle until they reached the fenced approach to Cedar Run Bridge. Zuri stopped immediately. The temporary barrier that should have blocked the trail lay several yards away in the grass. One orange warning sign had turned backward, facing the trees instead of the path. "That is not right," she said. Atlas stood still, nose lifted toward the bridge. Zuri parked her bicycle beside the fence and took a photograph of the displaced barrier. She did not intend to cross. The old bronze nameplate was fixed near the entrance, close enough to photograph from solid ground. She walked forward only a few feet, Atlas beside her. Fresh blue paint covered the steel railing. Beneath it, thin red lines of rust had already begun to show. Zuri photographed the nameplate, then noticed a large support bolt near the edge of the deck. The paint around it was cracked. A narrow gap separated the washer from the steel plate. Atlas lowered his body and refused to move farther. "You see it too," Zuri whispered. She raised her camera for one last photograph. The bridge gave a quiet metallic groan. Atlas stepped backward. Zuri turned toward him. Beneath her left foot, one of the deck boards shifted downward. She reached for the railing, but the section beside her tilted with the loose board. Her backpack caught briefly on a horizontal brace, slowing her descent before the strap tore free. Zuri slid through the opening and landed on a narrow inspection platform attached to the middle support, nearly 12 feet below the deck. The impact knocked the breath from her, but the platform held. Above her, Atlas barked once and moved toward the damaged section. "Stay," Zuri called. "Do not cross." The German shepherd froze. The river moved 6 feet below her, brown and fast against the stone. Zuri tested her wrist. It hurt, but her fingers moved. She pulled the red scarf from her backpack, tied it to the camera strap, and tossed it toward the opening. Atlas caught the fabric. "Find someone," she said. The dog hesitated. "Atlas, find someone." He disappeared toward the trail, returned once, then left again. On the third command, he ran without looking back. Zuri pressed herself against the wet steel and listened as his paws faded beneath the sound of the river. Atlas ran along the riverside trail with the red scarf dragging behind his collar, rainwater flashing from his sable coat each time he passed beneath an open stretch of sky. He reached the library path first, stopped and listened. No familiar footsteps followed. Evelyn was still inside, unaware that Zuri had not returned. The German shepherd turned toward the service road, where the sound of an approaching engine moved through the trees. Mason Reed's dark green Ford appeared beyond the trail entrance. Atlas stepped into the road and held his position. Mason slowed, stopped, and lowered the window. "Where did you come from?" he asked. Atlas approached the truck, pressed his nose against Mason's hand, then ran toward the bridge. Mason watched him disappear around the bend. Seconds later, Atlas returned. He touched Mason's hand again, turned and ran back down the trail. Mason stepped out of the truck but did not follow immediately. The dog returned a third time, the red scarf now clearly visible against his wet collar. Mud covered his paws, and one side of his body was streaked with blue paint from the bridge railing. Mason's attention sharpened. "Show me." Atlas moved quickly but never far enough to vanish from sight. He led Mason past the displaced barrier, the backward warning sign, and the purple bicycle resting near the fence. Mason stopped beside the bicycle and saw the child's helmet hanging from one handlebar. Atlas touched the front tire with his nose, then continued toward the bridge. The river sounded heavier there, filling the air with the steady force of water against stone. At the concrete approach, Atlas stopped. He would not step onto the deck. Mason looked across the span. One section near the middle had dropped several inches, but the main walkway appeared passable from where he stood. "Stay here," Mason said. He moved forward. Atlas blocked him. Mason tried the opposite side. The dog pressed his shoulder against Mason's leg and forced him back toward solid ground. "I need to see what happened." Atlas caught the lower edge of Mason's coat and pulled. Not hard, just enough. Mason stopped. The dog was not afraid of the bridge. He was obeying someone. Mason lowered his gaze and noticed small shoe prints on the wet boards. They led toward the middle span. None returned. A page from a school notebook clung to the railing. Across the top, written in careful pencil, were the words Cedar Run Bridge, Community History Project, Zuri Carter. Mason picked up the page without stepping onto the deck. Atlas moved to the south railing and stared downward. Mason followed the direction of his eyes. Beneath the tilted boards, a flash of yellow appeared and vanished. He dropped to one knee on the stable concrete approach. Zuri. The river carried his voice away. 3 faint knocks answered from below. Atlas whined and lowered his head. Mason removed his coat, folded it beneath his chest, and lay flat behind the bridge joint so his weight remained on the abutment. Through the gap, he saw a narrow platform attached to the center support and a small figure pressed against wet steel. "Can you hear me?" he called. "Yes," Zuri answered. "Do not step on the bridge. It moves when you do." Mason reached slowly for his telephone. "I will not move. I am calling for help." Atlas lay beside him, eyes fixed beneath the span. Zuri looked up through the broken deck. "He came back," she whispered. "I told him not to cross." Mason looked at the German shepherd, the scarf tied around his collar, and the warning the dog had carried without words. Then the river struck the support with a heavy branch, and the entire bridge gave a low metallic shudder. The metallic shudder traveled from the center support to the concrete beneath Mason's elbows. He stayed flat and waited until the vibration faded. Atlas backed away from the joint without being told, then lowered himself beside the south railing where he could still see Zuri through the damaged deck. "I am still here," Mason called. "Are you still on the platform?" "Yes." Zuri's voice trembled, but it remained clear. Mason dialed emergency services and gave the dispatcher the bridge name, the county road, the rising river, and the child's position beneath the middle span. He explained that the bridge deck shifted under weight, and that no one should approach from either side without structural assessment. The dispatcher confirmed that the county high-angle rescue team was responding from 6 miles away. Mason ended the call and placed his telephone on speaker beside him. "Zuri, I need you to describe everything around you," he said. "The platform is about 3 feet wide. There is a railing behind me, but one side is loose. The river is below. The deck is above my head. How far is the water from your feet?" Zuri leaned carefully toward the edge without standing. "About 6 feet. Maybe a little less now." Mason looked upstream. Rain continued falling across the valley, and the river carried branches against the stone supports with growing force. "Do you have a whistle or a flashlight?" "I have a red whistle. My camera flash still works." "Good. Keep the whistle around your neck. Do not use it unless you cannot hear me or the rescuers ask for it. Stay low and keep your back against the strongest steel post." Zuri shifted a few inches. The platform gave a faint metallic click. Atlas lifted his head. "It moved," she whispered. "I heard it," Mason said. "Stop where you are. You are doing exactly right." He stood only after crawling backward onto the trail, then used orange cones and reflective tape from his truck to block both approaches without stepping onto the bridge. A passing driver stopped near the road, but Mason raised one hand and directed him away from the structure. No extra weight. No curious footsteps. No mistakes. He returned to the concrete abutment and lay down again. "Tell me about your history project," he said. Zuri was quiet for a moment. "My great-grandfather helped repair this bridge. He was a welder." "What was his name?" "Isaiah Carter." "What did he teach your family about the bridge?" "Grandma says he believed a bridge should carry people home, not just carry traffic." Mason looked at the new blue paint bleeding rust beneath the rain. "He sounds like a wise man." Atlas pressed his nose near the gap. Zuri reached one hand upward, though 12 feet of air separated them. "He found you because I gave him my scarf," she said. "He kept trying to come back. He did not want to leave you. I told him to find someone and not cross." Mason rested one hand on the shepherd's wet neck. He followed both orders. A low siren sounded beyond the trees. Then another. Red lights appeared through the rain near the trail entrance. Fire Captain Elena Torres arrived with 5 rescue specialists carrying ropes, helmets, cameras, laser equipment, and structural supports. She stopped beside Mason and studied the bridge before looking down through the gap. Child is conscious, Mason said. Possible wrist injury. Platform approximately 12 feet below the deck. Water about 6 feet beneath her and rising. The deck shifts under load. Elena nodded once. Nobody uses the bridge. Mason pointed toward the center support. I have rappelling experience. I can descend from the south side. Elena looked directly at him. Your experience tells you how to descend. It does not tell you what this bridge will carry. She handed him a rescue radio. Your job is to keep her talking and report every movement you hear. Mason wanted to argue. Instead, he took the radio and returned to the abutment. Below, Zuri called his name. I am here, he answered. Elena's team began building a rope system from the stable riverbank. Then Atlas suddenly rose, ran toward the south side of the center support, and stared beneath the bridge. A yellow sleeve appeared through the steel. Zuri had shifted again. Mr. Mason, she said. The platform is leaning toward the river. Elena Torres raised one hand, and every rescuer stopped moving. Zuri, do not change position, she called. Keep your back against the center post and tell us what is moving. Mason lowered himself beside the concrete joint, careful to keep all his weight off the bridge deck. Atlas stood at the south railing, ears forward, watching the narrow space beneath the span. The outside edge is lower than it was, Zuri said. My water bottle rolled toward the river. Elena turned to the structural specialist. He aimed a laser displacement meter at the inspection platform from the stable's south bank. A red point appeared on the wet steel beneath Zuri. Platform has dropped 3/4 of an inch on the riverside, he said. Movement is slow, but the outer bracket may be loose. The rescue team changed its plan. Instead of placing any equipment on the bridge, they anchored 2 ropes to mature trees along the south bank and added a third safety line to the concrete abutment. A long camera pole extended beneath the damaged span. On the monitor, Zuri appeared against the central support, her yellow raincoat bright against the gray steel. The platform beneath her leaned slightly toward the water, but the inner edge remained attached. We have visual contact, Elena said. Zuri, you are in the safest place available. Stay low. Mason repeated the instruction in a softer voice. You do not need to move toward us. We are coming to you. Zuri nodded, then looked down as another branch struck the support below. The platform trembled. Atlas gave one short warning bark. Mason placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. She is still there. Elena studied the camera image. The north side of the support looked open, but the current pushed debris against it. The south side offered a clearer descent, though river noise made Zuri's voice seem to come from the opposite direction. Atlas moved farther south, stopped beside a gap in the railing, and looked back at Elena. He returned to Mason, then repeated the path. Once, twice. On the third time, he remained at the southern position. Elena did not follow the dog blindly. She ordered a second camera angle from downstream and asked the structural specialist to compare the original bridge plans with the visible brackets. The inspection platform is mounted on the south face, he confirmed. The drawing used in the current file shows it on the north. Elena's expression hardened. Then the current drawing is wrong. She assigned Thomas Bell, the lightest high-angle rescuer on the team, to descend from the south bank. A second rescuer stood fully harnessed as backup. Thomas checked his helmet, full-body harness, communication line, and rescue sling. Before he moved over the edge, Elena tested the rope system under load. Nothing shifted. Mason kept his attention on Zuri. Tell me what you can see upstream, he said. A red kayak sign, she answered. A broken tree near the rocks. Atlas's head above the railing. Good. Keep naming things. Your flashlight. The blue paint. One of the bolts has rust around it. Mason looked toward the cracked paint near the deck. The same rust line appeared beneath the new coating, exactly where Zuri had photographed it. You noticed that before the board moved? He asked. Yes. That is why I took the picture. Thomas began descending beside the support, never touching the bridge deck. 10 feet. 8. 6. Zuri watched his helmet light approach through the rain. I can see him, she said. That is Thomas, Mason replied. He is coming from your right. The platform shifted another fraction. Thomas stopped and attached a stabilizing line to the inner steel post before moving closer. Contact in 3 feet, he reported. Atlas lowered himself to the ground, eyes fixed beneath the span. Then Zuri's voice grew quiet. Mr. Mason, the river is only about 4 feet below me now. Mason looked toward Elena. She had already heard. Thomas, she said into the radio, secure the child first. We are out of time for anything else. Thomas reached the platform from the south side and placed one boot against the central support without adding weight to the leaning outer edge. Zuri, my name is Thomas Bell, he said. I am going to secure you before we move anything else. She nodded, keeping her back against the steel post as Mason had instructed. Rain ran from the edge of her hood. Her face was pale with cold, but her eyes remained focused. Thomas clipped a temporary safety line to the inner railing, tested it twice, then attached a second line to Zuri's harness point. You are connected to me now, he said. Even if the platform shifts, you are not going anywhere. Above them, Elena watched the laser readings while the rescue team managed the ropes from the south bank. The platform had dropped another quarter-inch, slow enough to measure but too steady to ignore. Mason remained on the concrete abutment with the rescue radio in one hand and Atlas pressed against his side. Zuri, can you hear me? He called. Yes. Thomas is going to place a full harness around you. Keep telling him if your wrist hurts. Thomas opened the rescue sling and guided it around her shoulders and legs without asking her to stand. He tightened each strap carefully, checking that nothing pressed against the injured wrist. Can you move your fingers? He asked. Zuri flexed them. Yes. Any pain in your neck or back? No good. We are going up together. The river struck the central support with another branch. The steel beneath them trembled. Thomas tightened his grip on the inner post while the safety line held firm. Atlas rose and gave one short bark toward the span. Mason placed his palm against the shepherd's wet shoulder. She is secured, he said, as much for the dog as for himself. Elena ordered the haul team to take tension. The main rope lifted until the harness supported part of Zuri's weight, but Thomas kept her seated. Do not stand, he told her. Let the rope carry you. Zuri looked up through the broken deck. What about my camera? It hung from a strap against the post, just beyond her reach. Thomas secured it inside a small equipment pouch clipped to his harness. It is coming with us. Mason heard her exhale. Your project is safe, he said. You are safer. Elena counted down. 3, 2, 1. Lift. The ropes tightened. Thomas and Zuri rose together from the platform, moving outward from the support so they would not touch the damaged deck. The first 2 feet passed smoothly. Then the leaning platform gave a sharp metallic click below them. Everyone froze. The laser point jumped across the screen. Hold position, Elena ordered. Thomas remained suspended beside Zuri, one arm around the back of her harness and the other controlling their distance from the steel. The platform settled another inch toward the river, but the inner bracket remained attached. Zuri looked down. The water was now less than 4 feet beneath the ledge. Do not watch the river, Thomas said. Look at the south bank. See the yellow helmets. She turned her head. Yes. That is where we are going. Mason kept his voice steady. And Atlas is waiting there. The German shepherd moved to the edge of the safety zone, watching the yellow sleeve rise beside the bridge support. Elena checked the rope angle. Resume slowly. 6 inches at a time. The haul team pulled. Thomas and Zuri climbed through the rain, past the underside of the bridge and the broken boards that had hidden her from view. 10 feet from the bank, a gust pushed them toward the steel. Thomas used a guideline to hold them clear. 5 feet. 3. Then rescuers reached out from stable ground and guided Zuri beneath the temporary shelter. Thomas unclipped the main line only after she was seated on a rescue mat. A medic wrapped her in a thermal blanket and began checking her wrist, breathing, and circulation. Zuri looked past everyone. Atlas. Elena opened the safety boundary. The German shepherd crossed the wet ground, slowed in front of her, and pressed his head against her chest. Zuri wrapped both arms around his neck. His body became completely still. Mason stood several yards away with rain dripping from his coat, allowing the moment to belong to the girl and the dog. Then Atlas lifted his head and looked back toward the bridge. A section of the leaning platform broke free and disappeared into the river below. Elena watched it vanish beneath the current. "Another minute," she said quietly, "and we might not have had a platform left." The rescue shelter filled with the quiet sounds that follow danger when everyone finally remembers how to breathe. A medic wrapped Zuri's wrist in a soft support and checked the warmth in her fingers while Evelyn Carter hurried down the trail beneath an umbrella held by a county deputy. The moment Zuri saw her grandmother, she lifted one hand from Atlas's neck. Evelyn crossed the last few yards without speaking and knelt beside the rescue mat, pulling both the girl and the German shepherd into her arms. Mason remained near the edge of the safety zone. He watched the reunion without stepping closer. The river still moved hard beneath Cedar Run Bridge, and the damaged deck gave a soft metallic groan each time debris struck the central support. Elena Torres ordered the entire trail closed and assigned 2 firefighters to guard both approaches. No one would step onto the bridge again until an independent structural team arrived. "Mr. Mason," Zuri called. He approached only after Evelyn nodded. Zuri held out the small camera Thomas had secured during the rescue. Mud marked the casing, but the screen still worked. "I took pictures before the board moved," she said. Mason crouched beside her. The first image showed the displaced barrier. The second showed the warning sign turned toward the trees. The third showed the old bridge nameplate. Then came a close photograph of the support bolt beneath the new blue paint. Rust formed a dark ring around the washer, and a narrow gap separated the bolt from the steel plate. Mason enlarged the image. "This is the middle span?" "Yes. Near the place where I fell." Zuri moved to the next photograph. It showed the board sinking beneath her shoe, the paint cracked along one edge, and a different style of bolt farther beneath the railing. "The inspection picture in your papers does not match this," she said. Mason looked at her. "How do you know what was in the inspection file?" "The company posted one picture on the project board near the library. I photographed it for my assignment." She opened an earlier image taken that morning. The public project display showed a clean silver bolt, an unbroken blue plate, and no bronze Cedar Run nameplate behind it. The steel pattern was also different. One bridge used a diagonal brace. Cedar Run used a vertical one. Mason stared at both images side by side. A child had found in minutes what an entire approval chain had ignored. Elena stepped beneath the shelter and examined the photographs. "These are not the same support," she said. "No," Mason answered. "They are not." A truck stopped beyond the trail gate. Derek Cole emerged carrying a waterproof case and wearing a dark construction jacket. His face changed when he saw Zuri beneath the blanket, Atlas beside her, and the broken bridge behind the rescue lights. Mason stood. "I told you to bring every original inspection file." Derek approached slowly and placed the case on the hood of Mason's Ford. Inside were load test schedules, contractor notes, electronic approvals, and printed photographs. Mason found his own signature on the release authorizing the final payment stage. The load test date listed below it was tomorrow. Why was the project marked 90? The rain eased to a steady whisper as the rescue team secured both ends of Cedar Run Bridge and ordered everyone away from the damaged span. Zuri sat beneath the temporary shelter with a thermal blanket around her shoulders, Atlas pressed against her knee, and her grandmother hurrying up the trail from the library. Evelyn Carter crossed the safety line only after Elena Torres gave permission. She knelt beside Zuri, touched her face with both hands, and held her without speaking. Mason remained several yards away. He had learned enough that afternoon to understand that some reunions did not need a witness standing in the center of them. A medic confirmed that Zuri's wrist was strained but not seriously injured. Her breathing was steady. Her body temperature was beginning to rise. Only then did Elena carry the recovered camera to Mason. "She said the photographs matter," Elena said. The screen was scratched, but the memory card still worked. Mason scrolled through the images beneath the shelter light. The first showed the bronze Cedar Run nameplate. The second showed the displaced barrier. The third showed the warning sign turned toward the trees. Then came a close photograph of a support bolt beneath fresh blue paint. Rust surrounded the washer. A narrow gap separated it from the steel plate. Mason enlarged the image. The bolt did not match the one in the inspection photograph he had reviewed that morning. The head shape was different. So was the surrounding bracket. "Those are not the same structure," Elena said. An engine approached along the service road. Derek Cole stepped from a company truck carrying a waterproof document case. His jacket was soaked by the time he reached the shelter. He looked first at the broken bridge, then at Zuri and Atlas, and finally at Mason. "I came as soon as the project office called," he said. Mason placed Zuri's camera beside the inspection file. "Show me the original load test." Derek opened the case but did not remove anything. The test was scheduled for this afternoon. The handover report says it was complete. The report was prepared in advance. Prepared or approved? Derek's silence answered before his words did. He removed a stack of documents. The final inspection summary carried Mason's electronic authorization from the previous funding stage. Below it was a photograph of a clean support bolt and a completed checklist. Zuri leaned forward beneath the blanket. "That is not Cedar Run," she said. Everyone turned toward her. She pointed to the photograph. "The bridge nameplate should be behind that railing. And our middle support is stone at the bottom. That one is all concrete." Elena compared the image with the original bridge drawing on her tablet. Zuri was right. The photograph belonged to another crossing. Derek lowered his eyes. The subcontractor uploaded the wrong image set. Mason's voice remained quiet. "And no one verified it. We were trying to hold the opening date. The town had already announced the ceremony. Vendors were booked. The press release was out. So the barriers were moved before the load test." Derek looked toward the river. "I authorized that." Mason glanced at Zuri's yellow raincoat, Atlas's red scarf, and the empty place where the inspection platform had disappeared into the current. "A child almost became the cost of your schedule." Derek flinched, but Mason did not raise his voice. Anger would have been easier. Responsibility was heavier. He picked up the approval page and saw his own name beneath the system that rewarded early completion and punished delay. "Freeze every Reed civil mobility project using this inspection contractor," he said. "Preserve all records. Notify the State Transportation Office and an independent structural engineering firm. Cedar Run stays closed." Derek nodded slowly. "What happens to the reopening?" Mason looked toward Evelyn. "That is no longer my decision alone." He ordered the creation of a community oversight panel that would include residents, independent engineers, the fire department, school representatives, and people who use the bridge every day. No ceremony. No private announcement. No new deadline until the structure earned one. Zuri held out her camera. "There is one more picture." Mason looked at the final image. It showed Atlas at the bridge entrance, refusing to place one paw on the deck. Behind him, fresh blue paint covered the rust. Mason stared at it for a long time. The dog had seen no report, signed no approval, and understood no deadline. He had only listened to the bridge and refused to ignore what it was saying.